So you played DOF, the bombardment phase, and the Soviets got their first bombardment effects. So this regimental artillery group underneath the armor unit there, that rag right there, fired at 2 hexes away at the West German armored cavalry in the open there, and got a disrupt result. Now, since there's more artillery here, the first thing I wanted to figure out is, are there any compound effects? And there aren't. So getting another disrupt against a disrupted target isn't going to do anything more. So I took the other rag there. They're flipped over now because they fired. This rag tried to get some effects on the West German mechanized infantry there in the suburban town, and missed, or no effect, so it's flipped over. But we did get a disruption here, and interestingly, disruption is going to have all of the effects of area jamming plus a few more effects on top of that. So at least the disruption of that armored cavalry unit there will allow the maneuver forces to destroy it during an impulse. So with bombardment done, we move to our impulses. Soviet impulse is always first. Again, other than a pass, there's a general impulse and a formation impulse. So the Soviet side is going to declare its type, and then activate a number of units depending on that type of impulse chosen. And then before activating each unit, the player is going to check whether its formation is jammed or its headquarters disrupted. All right, we're going to try to get our first ground combat in here. So the 6th Guards is going to do a formation activation. I'll just set the headquarters off to the side. It'll be flipped over when they're done. Now, the West Germans, they're in the open and they're disrupted. So I think what I'm trying to do is have this armor regiment move by itself and just try to have an immediate combat, whatever the game calls it, hasty attack or whatever. But first I want to figure out now I want to figure out exactly what the effects of disruption are on the target unit before the Soviet tanks roll up to it. So the ZOC of a disrupted unit does not compel attacks. Okay, effects of area jamming. Any unit activated in an area jammed hex loses 2 movement points. Any unit located in an area jammed hex incurs at the instant of combat a DRM and may not call for support. Oh, that applies here. And headquarters doesn't apply here. Artillery units doesn't apply here. And helicopter base. Okay, so let's see what that means. Okay, so under the die roll modifiers, there's a +2 for any defender area jammed, and there's +2 any defender disrupted. Clearly it's +2 because the West Germans are disrupted, but I'm going to assume that I go ahead and do the area or any defender area jammed +2, and that these are cumulative because it has jamming disruption effects summary, and it says ground combat. So +2 when attacked. Modifiers for disruption and jamming are cumulative. So I'm going to assume that that's +4. Okay, +4. Okay, clearly we have to get to the fight first, so activating the tank regiment there, and they're going to move 1 hex into the rough terrain. So again, it has a movement allowance of 5. That's the far right number there, and it is 2 movement points for rough, and it looks like they're just basic movement costs. No different movement costs for types of units. All right, so he uses 2 movement points to move into the rough, leaves 3, and then here, this is interesting, especially since the defender's disrupted. Well, all right. Okay, for movement, normally, considering zones of control, normally a unit must stop upon entering the enemy ZOC, and the unit must attack and pay the movement point cost for the type of attack. Obviously here before as we already went over, the disrupted unit is not going to compel this attack, even though the Soviets still want to attack. So the question is, okay, so there is a ground combat and support summary. Nice. There are in the game, which is nice, there are hasty attacks, deliberate attacks, and assaults. Now, really, what's the difference? I mean, no movement point cost for a hasty attack, but a die roll modifier of -1. +1 movement point, no die roll modifier, +3 movement points, +1 modifier. If it's just movement points, okay, at this point I just don't think I can figure out for sure what all the nuances here are. So since I can pay for an assault, I'll pay for an assault. I don't know if this is the right choice at all. Again, you have those 3 choices. We'll see though. So if the tank regiment pays 2 for the rough and pays 3 more for an assault, then that's its 5 movement allowance. So we'll see how that plays out. So first thing is we've identified the attacking unit. It's the Soviet tank regiment. The disrupted West German armored cavalry unit is the defender. The type of attack is the assault. Defender may fly supporting helicopter, but I don't think that the West Germans can get support here because they're disrupted. So attacker and then defender announce supporting airstrikes. I don't think, no, we don't have those. Attacker and then defender announce supporting artillery. I'm just going to save my artillery. I think I want to save my artillery for that attack. So therefore I'm not going to use it. Again, I don't think... Yeah, disruption includes the same effects as area jamming, and under area jamming, a unit cannot call for support, and calling for support refers to the artillery support part of the rules, so don't think that's allowed. So now we will resolve the combat using the CRT. Okay. By the way, here is where we would reveal strength markers. We don't have strength markers. Neither of these units... Actually, no units have acquired strength markers yet, so we're going to skip that step. Total of the current attack values of all attacking ground and supporting helicopter units. Total of the current defense values. Find a ratio. Roll the die. Apply the appropriate modifiers. We know we're going to have DRMs at least because the defender is disrupted, and then we're going to find the results. So we'll go through all of that. So the easy part to get out of the way is that the Soviets have an attack strength of 12 against the West German defense value of 2. So again, this is attack 12, defend 8, movement allowance of 5. The West Germans have attack 2, defend 2, and movement allowance of 5. So 12 to 2 is 6 to 1. And then I think the die roll modifiers are +2 for area jamming effects and +2 for disruption effects, and +1 for hasty attack. So I think it's the 6 to 1 column +5 DRM. Okay, the Soviets roll a 9, very, very good. +5 is 15. That's off the chart, but let's see exactly how we apply these. Right off the bat, the attackers aren't going to take anything, but let's see how we assess. Pretty sure the West Germans are destroyed, but we'll see. So the CRT 6 to 1 column goes up to 12, so it's 0/2R, attacker result 0, defender result 2R. If modified die roll is greater than 12, then die roll equals 12. We know that. Oh yeah, so how do we assess the 2R result? Okay, so that is 2 step losses and retreat. So the question is, how many steps does a West German, can't imagine it's a lot, a West German armored reconnaissance company have? So how many steps? All right, so by process of elimination, this unit has 1 step, so it's clearly eliminated. because Soviet Armor or Mech Regiment has 3 steps. Soviet Armor Battalion has 2 steps. NATO Armor or Mech Battalion have 2 steps. Air Mobile Battalion and all other units have 1 step. So I think this is all other units have 1 step. So that unit is eliminated. And now we'll see what happens at this point with our victorious Soviet tanks there. Okay, this is interesting. So I was trying to figure out what the difference is between these different types of attacks. Actually, there's a huge difference, because whether you do a hasty, deliberate, or assault is going to have a huge bearing on the type of support you can bring to bear. Then it does matter the MPs you're paying for the attack. So remember, the Soviet tank regiment entered the rough hex adjacent to the defender and declared an assault, paying 3 MPs for the assault, meaning that it had exhausted its movement allowance. Now, very, very interesting. I don't think many games do this, although I actually like it, but was not expecting this. The length of advance after combat is the leftover movement allowance. So actually, that unit has nothing left over, so I guess it cannot advance at all, which is very interesting. I do believe that's what you're supposed to do, so I'm leaving him there. Now I see why, because the odds were so much in the Soviets' favor, especially since they weren't planning on bringing any. See, now I see. So since the raw odds were in their favor, and they weren't even planning on bringing any support, they should have done a hasty attack, suffered a -1 DRM, but they already had +4 for the defender's state. Then that would have meant that it had all its remaining movement allowance. So that means that had it done that and blown away the German defenders, then it could have continued on. So it spent 2 to enter the rough, so it'd go 3, 4, 5, or whatever. So this game does not appear to use whole hex advances at all. It is remaining movement points. Thus, as the rules say, thus advance allows units to expend unused movement points. Very interesting.